Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we have Deborah Crowe with us. Deborah has 3 decades of traversing the global landscape and a kaleidoscope of life experiences. And with a short introduction like that, I'm just excited and can't wait to get into it. Deborah, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit of how you've ended up where you are today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Isn't this always a fun-loaded question to start with? I've been an entrepreneur. It'll be 35 years at the end of May. My background is in neuroscience. I was a neurotrauma case manager for almost 20 years. And I think this story is going to lend such a great landscape for us today for our conversation. I was asked to take on 5 executives who were on short-term disability claims for stress. And from the day that I received the 5 referrals to 10 months later, I lost 3 VPs and 2 CEOs to cancer. And then the goosebump moment, this is where the hair on the back of your neck stands up. They all landed up at the local hospice where I volunteer. So it's a very humbling experience to be with people at the end of life. But that became the intersection of my private life as a volunteer and my work life. And I made a promise to those 5 executives that I was going to do something about it because they jeopardized their health, their well-being, their mental health, their marriage. There was a lot of loss climbing that proverbial ladder to hit that ceiling. And they had nothing left and were now palliative. So I took a year to close my medical clinic, and I had to say goodbye to a lot of patients and help my staff find other jobs. And it was kind of a pivotal moment when my coach said, "When are you going to become a coach for executives?" And I was like, "I don't want to be a coach. I'm a medical person." And he said, "But you've been coaching for almost 20 years, really large medical teams. And sometimes it takes that external person to look inside your world to show you all the transferable skills you have." So I moved into the leadership development space 16 years ago. I've also been teaching at our local college for 35 years, and I also teach at our local university. I teach emotional intelligence. So that's the fast track version.
Awesome. Now, with the experience that you have, I'm kind of curious, those VPs and folks that ended up at hospice and you were volunteering there, knowing what can happen and the struggles that go with building a business, what were some of the things that maybe they said, this really wasn't worth it? Or maybe they said this was completely worth it, but I think that's a valuable question.
It is, and it's there's actually been some extensive research done on the top 5 things that kind of people allude to in their last days as they're still able to speak. The journey to the top wasn't worth it. Putting up with toxic positivity, letting business acumen and metrics and KPIs take away from family time, failed marriages, multiple marriages, and they had everything extrinsic and materialistic that money could buy, and they were so lonely. And now they were sick. And in hospice, nobody was coming to visit. So, just having that self-audit of not taking care of themselves, not having any element of self-care in their life, and everything was push, go, get to the next thing. And they became, human doings and got caught up in the money and the stature to the point where it at some juncture took over their level of self-worth. And it was really, really sad to sit and hear how similar those 5 conversations were. And I think that was probably one of the biggest elements of why I chose to move out of the medical space into the leadership development space. And I haven't lost an executive since I joined, which I'm really happy to tell you that.
That is awesome. And if I could share from a different perspective, I have a local here at home. I have a men's group. We meet every other Thursday. And one of the gentlemen, Don, I would say, and this is terrible, I don't know exactly his age, but I would say 70s, but he has outlived 2 wives. And we were having a discussion, and he said, and I'll be honest, the discussion was around sometimes I take on more than what I probably should, and I knowingly do it because I enjoy it. And so I'm at a place in my life where I get to take on the things that I would like to, but sometimes there's still too many of them. And what he said to me has stuck with me, and that was that he's outlived 2 wives. And today, when he sits and he thinks about it, he doesn't miss any of the cars that he bought them, the diamond rings that he bought them. What he misses is the conversations and the time that they spent together. And I'm looking at it from my angle thinking, wow, someday when I'm gone, do I want people to say, he was a great man, but he didn't have time to spend time with me, my daughter, my wife, so on and so forth. So that was why I was digging in there a little bit more. I won't deny that might have been a little selfish on my end. Just curious, what you found during that kind of end of life journey. And you have a book, Heart-Centered Leadership, and I'm assuming that through that experience, that's what spawned the book to come out. And you just said for you to kind of pivot and go in a different direction. But can you explain to us a little bit about the Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook?
Yeah, I would love to. It certainly was one of the elements, but it was sitting in my heart for 30 years. And I was told when I started my company at 24 that there was no room for heart or love or heart-centered leadership and business acumen. And I won't take away from the book, but it was losing my dad at 21, having to stop university, having to grow up super, super quick. And I had resilience emotionally before I had emotional intelligence because I had to survive. I had to eat. I had rent. I was on my own. And I had some really awful bosses. Like, I won't even candy coat it. And they taught me so much. But my Irish Nana was really pivotal in my life. And she has a whole chapter in my book. And she really instilled solid core beliefs and values by the time I was 8 years old. And she always said to me that you can control you. You cannot control what other people say, how other people react, which is where we are now today with just everybody wanting to learn so much about emotional intelligence. But at the end of the day, if we don't look after ourselves, again, that self-care piece, another whole chapter in my book, if we don't manage our inner leader and model that for others, whether you're a C-suite or a middle manager or a team lead, you're doing yourself from a health perspective not a good thing, because stress over time causes dis-ease in the body. And it's not selfish, it's vital. And many things can wait until the next day. And again, these were things alluded to me in these conversations with these 5 execs, like what I thought was important really wasn't important. And what I kept putting off, I thought was small, but it was actually the big things in my life. And just a lot of remorse and shame and regret. And I mean, I was a stranger. I know I had a professional relationship with them, but it really saddened me that I was the person bedside with them and there were no family, there was no friends. So again, honored to be that person, but also sad after I reflected on it. And, I talk about them every day because I want to keep their legacy alive. But the playbook for me, I wrote it during COVID. I figured it was a gift of time and I just got it done. And it's interesting. I had a full circle moment with that book because it landed up going number one in health administration, which is the world I left. So it's very interesting to see the dynamics of things and how I've left the medical world, but it hasn't fully let me go, which I always think and feel that is so interesting.
So COVID, the world stopped, at least in you and I's two parts of the world. And many people for maybe a year or more worked from home, and they started to maybe realize some of these things. Why in the world, and I'm including myself here, why in the world did we go back to being busier than we ever were before? It was almost like we're trying to make up for everything that we didn't do over that year. But I know personally, I learned that there were a lot of things that you did daily that you thought were super important that you come to find out really aren't that important. So what leads us to, and I'm also thinking about something I said before the interview, you can read a book, but if you don't apply it. And so many of us have read all kinds of books about, taking time, meditation, yoga, whatever it is. And just for the record, I didn't read a book on yoga and I don't do yoga. But what makes us think that, that's not me. I don't need that until it's too late. What in our minds makes us continue to drive forward?
Well, I am a yoga teacher. I became a yoga teacher at 50, and I've been teaching for almost 9 years. I think busyness is a mask for loneliness. I think busyness is a mask for, can somebody look at me? It's a negative self-worth. And when you're busy, you don't have to think about how sad you are. And I say this to you coming from a place as a fellow coach, and it's something that I see in a lot of people. I've coached a lot of athletes as well. And when people really lean into their feelings and their thoughts and their emotions, and I'm going to use the runner as an example, I've had people say, I thought I was running to exercise and stay in shape. And now I realize I've been running because I wanted to run away and not deal with this, this, and this. And I'm ready to open the lid on Pandora's box. And I know it's going to be hard and messy, but I'm ready. So just that view, that self-regard, and people compartmentalize things, and being, coming from a trauma place in medicine, trauma is a whole other show, but people either succumb to it, compartmentalize it, or they keep navigating and going and going and going, but eventually the emotions will bring them to a full stop.
Makes sense. Yesterday, I had recorded another interview, and that guest said something, basically, whether it's exercise, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, eating, shopping, her thought was you want to remove, I believe I'm getting this or quoting her correctly, but remove the emotional attachment to it. Why are you doing it? There's nothing wrong with going out and going for a run, but if you're going out to go for a run, as you said, to run away from something or to not think, then that's becoming a problem. So, how do you start to bring yourself out of that? And then, well, I'll back up. I want to ask a slightly different question first, because I think you kind of touched on it. At the beginning of our businesses, whether it's our career working for someone else, we start a new business, the general concept is you might have to work 80 or 90 hours a week to get this thing off of the ground, to get it going. And that's kind of generally accepted. And we've all run into the folks that wear it like a badge. Well, I worked 96 hours this week. Now, my question would be to them, well, then what about your family and your friends and everybody else? How much time did they get? But is that necessary? Is it ever necessary to go above and beyond outside of extraordinary circumstances, an earthquake, a tornado, and you're helping the community? Those things I think you set aside. Is there ever a time that you should push yourself past the limits that, of sleep, work? Is there ever a time that it makes sense to do that?
I think it's an individual question, and I think life hands us all extenuating circumstances. I mean, emergencies and accidents aren't scheduled. They don't have a date and time. So I think we all have peaks and valleys in our life where we're sleep deprived for whatever reason. Do I think it's a healthy activity of your daily living? Absolutely not. When you're sleep deprived, you're not thinking straight. And when you're not thinking straight, you're not feeling well. And I mean that from an emotional capacity. So we all know the things to do, but it's kind of like healthy eating. I'm the 90-10 model. 90% of the time I eat super healthy. I work out, I do yoga. But if I want the cheeseburger, I'm going to have the cheeseburger, and I'm having it because I want it, not because I need it. So again, it's a mindset shift of looking at what you do in your life, because what you do in your life greatly affects your leadership.
Makes sense. So what are some practices that you would recommend that you can kind of start with to get yourself started and to start to have that mind shift or paradigm shift, if you will?
I think it has to be baby steps. I start with two simple things. Hydration. We all talk a lot regardless of what our job is. We all talk a lot when we're not in work. Even if you're an introvert, there's still an element of talking. Drinking water. It's number one, it's good for you. We need to be hydrated. Our brains like when we're hydrated. And we need to get up from our desk to have a break. And drinking water is going to help you have that bio break. The other thing is, it is essential to have white space in your calendar. You can't go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. Number one, cognitively, you're not with the person you think you are in each meeting because you cognitively still have remnants of the previous meeting. And if you don't have the white space, you need the break. You need to get up from your desk, maybe step outside, maybe walk your dog, go get some more water, whatever it is. That is absolutely critical. White space in your calendar. And then the last one is, I like waking up early in the morning. I'm not going to go on to some deep dive on you on a morning routine because, again, I think it's personal. I like to have an hour in the morning in my house, quiet before everybody gets up, to just think. Look at my day, whether it's meditation or prayer or devotion or whatever it is for you, journaling. You got to find what you need to set yourself up. And I don't mean grabbing your cell phone and starting the scrolling and having your amygdala go from 0 to 160 seconds. Just quiet time, coffee, tea, whatever it is for you. And just allowing your mind to ease into the day because you've just come off the sleep cycle. So why come right out of the gate and grab your phone and everything starts going and you start thinking about all the things? It totally changes who you are from the moment you wake up to the moment you choose to do that. And it can be like 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. But I encourage folks to take time every day. It makes a huge difference on how your day is going to unfold.
So you hit on picking up the phone, and I'm just curious your thoughts, and specifically maybe for the younger leaders that might be out there listening, and maybe your thoughts even on younger students that maybe don't know where they're going to be a leader, but they may be someday. I've often thought about this, and I've mentioned it before, that in 1952. Even if a family, if both parents were working, they came home after work and, that it was time to make dinner, play games, maybe 1952, I'm not sure, watch television. I think, television was out, listen to the radio, but they did things, and really their only glimpse to the outside world outside of their community was maybe the news at 6 p.m. or, the newspaper. today, people emotionally have the opportunity to be connected to so many events and so many people that really maybe they shouldn't be, or they couldn't have been in the past. What type of emotional toll does that take on us of being on that phone or on social media on your computer? And what amazes me is I only use social media for putting out messages, from our business. I personally do not participate in any way, shape, or form. Yes, I have a page because I have to have a business page. And I think the last time I posted something was like 2017. And it was a pretty picture of a sunset because so my real question is, what effect do you think that has on us and takes away from our self-care?
Oh, we could do a whole show just on that. So the first part of your question, I have two young daughters. My youngest is just graduating from university. Everyone needs a digital detox. We've become so dependent on these phones, and it doesn't matter where you go, people are on them. I see people walking. I've let people run into me on a sidewalk who's on their phone.
Yep.
I do it intentionally to say, you might want to look up. It's a great invention, but it's become an addiction. I see a lot of young people who don't like picking up the phone to make phone calls because their way of communicating is text or email. And I've been really diligent with our own kids. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, get off your phone. I try and not even touch my phone on the weekend. I have an iPad where I like to read my books and do things, and I don't have any of my business stuff on there. And it's just so lovely to have that digital detox. But it's like any addiction. It's a habit that has to be changed. And for this generation, unfortunately, it's all they know. I was one of the parents who was one of the last, and my kids didn't get a phone till grade 9. And they harped for 2 years for me to do it, but I was just trying to defer that addiction because it affects their sleep, it affects their mood. And like you said, we have enough thoughts in our head, 80,000 a day. And the amount of information coming at us is like a tsunami. And what it's doing is it's affecting mental health, which we've seen, especially in young kids. We don't get a break from thinking, and that's exhausting. And when you're mentally exhausted, you're not really good to anyone or anything because you don't have a clear point of view to create thoughts, to have a response. Like you're just done. I think we're setting up for a generation of burnout, which we're already seeing across multiple generations, like a 50-year span, because we're seeing that in the workplace from 20 to 70. And I think people have FOMO. Like if they disconnect, they're going to miss something. I like JOMO, the joy of missing out. That's the bandwagon that I've jumped on, and I'm okay not to see that ad or that story or whatever. And I also don't like how much falseness is out there and some of the messaging that is given to our young people. You and I were fortunate enough because we have knowledge and wisdom, and we bridge that gap with our maturity. And we just know we don't need to be on. You even alluded, you haven't posted in a long time. We all have our own personal preference. I think it's another great strategy for self-care. And taking a digital detox, whether it's X amount of hours per day or on Sunday or whatever it is for you, our minds need to rest, and not only when we're sleeping. I think that's the critical piece to answering your question. Our minds need to rest just as much as our bodies. And in addition to X amount of hours of sleep, I hope most people get 7 or 8, but they don't. Most people walking around are sleep deprived and cognitively fried from devices.
So to kind of two things. One, it's been 6 years, I believe. I got rid of television, and it was just one of those things that I kind of felt and now when I say that, if there's something that I really want to watch or something like that, we'll watch it on our computer or what have you, but there is no television in my house. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and for the most part, she's okay with it. Occasionally she'll say, yeah, why can't we have a TV like everybody else? But for the most part, we're outside, we're doing things, we're creating something. And that's the other piece that I think is missing so much, is that we're bringing this next generation along to kind of say, YouTube can be great. You can find anything there, right? But the problem is when you start to rely on it and say, I don't need to learn that, I'll go to YouTube. Whereas, kind of my mindset is I'll go to YouTube to learn how to do something new, and I'm going to practice it until I don't need YouTube anymore. But we're kind of, I think, using it as a crutch that I don't need to learn it at all, because why do I need to fill my mind with it when, it's right there. But the second thing, I have a niece and nephew, and I've mentioned this once before, I think, but I just recently, they were home, and they were with lots of family. And of course, most of the family use social media. And the one day somebody, I believe it was my wife, brought up a picture of them from like the day before that was on social media. And they looked at it and they said, look, 28 people love me. And in their mind, I mean, they were very serious. And in my mind, that means absolutely nothing. But to them, at 4 and 5 years old, that was important. And that really has stuck with me, that's the least important thing in the world. I could care less what the people on social media think. I want to know what the people around me think and value maybe, what I say. So do you, kind of sticking with that, do you think face-to-face interaction is still important today with Zoom and we're meeting right now, across Teams, but is face-to-face interaction still important?
I think it's viable. I think it's beyond important. I think it's vital to our well-being. AI will never replace this. It's enjoyable to see you, even though we're not in the same room. There's still a connection, having a great conversation. Just using your example, I'll tell you why that scares me for those young kids. Social development is done at the age of 6, and they're being set up to only feel loved if they're externally validated. How scary is that?
Yes. The other example I often use with younger leaders, and I've heard many times something to the nature of, I'm struggling to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend or somebody to spend time with and date. But yet at the same time, to your point, you see them on the street looking at their phone and, corresponding on social media, so on and so forth. And 5 great candidates could walk past them, but it doesn't even dawn on them to look around and actually engage in person, as opposed to looking for that person online. And, we could go on and on about that, but we are sometimes just missing what is right in front of us. And I think we are extremely lucky. I'm 45 years old, so I'm right at that point where I grew up. There were no cell phones. They became introduced. I use all of them. I use iPad, iPhone. I have an Apple Watch, which I don't wear unless I'm traveling or running or exercising. The reason I stopped wearing it was I realized how rude it was when I was in an in-person meeting, and that thing would buzz and I would look at it. And I had a few people ask me, are you tight on time? Do we need to reschedule this? And I realized why they said that. So I've stopped wearing it because I don't want anything to take my attention away from you. Right before we started, my phone rang and I put it on silent because I don't want anything to take away from our time together and our conversation. And I think that's missing today with so many people. So you also talk about vulnerability and authenticity being very important. I sometimes, authenticity, I think people can say, yes, I'm very authentic and I believe that. But when we start to talk about vulnerability, and I think the two are tied, but why do so many executives think it is not okay to show vulnerability? And what are your thoughts on how they should do that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think they're afraid to show it because they're worried what other people will think and they'll be judged. So if we dig deep down into this garden, there's a self-worth piece, and most of them are attached to that extrinsic title, to that role and responsibility, to the length of time that they work to get there. And, you know, the old adage, like, if it's not broke, why do I have to fix it? Like, why? Why do I need to be vulnerable with my team? Why do I need to be authentic? They are linked together. Show them that you're imperfect. COVID was a perfect example. You know, for the first 8 weeks, all I heard was, what do I tell my people? You tell them what you know. You tell them what you know in the time that you know it, and that you have no other information, because we didn't have a file to go to that said, you know, risk management, COVID process, and all the steps. We've never gone through anything like this as a global society. And it saddens me, and it's the greatest love of the work that I do. And when you can gently help people unpack the authentic and vulnerable self, it is always linked to something that happened in their life, usually as a young child. And creating that space and having that presence that you talked about, and attentively listening without judgment, without, you know, adding in your 2 cents, just letting them fully express their emotion in a safe space, to me, is the greatest gift you can give to another human being.
So that is something that many leaders might attempt. But when somebody comes in one day into the safe space and says, you are a complete moron and I can't stand you, so on and so forth, how should they handle that? Because many times, and even myself sometimes, I can revert into being that dominant, overbearing person that is going to take control of the situation and fix it, you know, and maybe that's fire the person. Maybe that's, you know, tell them they're completely wrong and don't ever do that again. That was inappropriate, you know, all of those things. But if you're trying to have that culture within your business or within your team, what happens when somebody comes and they are brutally honest on what their feelings are at that moment in time? Is there anything that's inappropriate?
First of all, if someone's going to feel safe enough to express that, that's a win. It's not a bad thing. That's a win. There's trust and rapport there. And as a leader, I'm not going to hear good all the time. I'm not going to hear great all the time. I want the good, the great, the bad, the indifference. Some of the best learning opportunities and conversions or integrations come from a conversation like that, because behind those hurt words and feelings being expressed is something going on in that person's life. And a good leader holds space, is silent, doesn't need to say anything. And a lot of times I really coach people to say, if you're going to go in and say that, start the conversation by saying, I just need to get a few things off of my chest, and I'm not looking for feedback or judgment. I just need to say this. And you just hold space. A physical cue is you can lean in with your upper body. Some people need to watch your eyes blinking. Some people need a physical nod that you're in tune with them. A good leader knows what each team member needs, wants, and requires.
Makes sense. And as I'm thinking through everything that we've talked about so far, much of it is what I would say personal growth, opposed to opposed to skill growth or learning how to run a better meeting, and they could be side effects of some of the things we're talking about. But when we start to think about personal growth, and the high D dominant leader that's out there is going to say, well, how does this apply to the bottom line? What is this going to do for my organization? Do you have any examples of, by becoming a heart-centered leader, what happens to the bottom line? What happens to turnover within the business? What are the business effects of being a heart-centered leader?
So heart-centered leadership, my definition, is honoring your connection with people, period. There's no reciprocity. How does it convert to good business acumen? You invert the fraction. It's people over profit. When you look after your people, the profit will always be there. And the proof for the senior, listeners that are listening, look at all the companies globally that navigated COVID and didn't blink an eye. And when you look at who was at the helm of those companies, they looked after their people. They didn't get caught up in the extrinsic stuff. It was about safety, pivoting, how can we still operate and look after our people, our clients, et cetera, et cetera. The business acumen will always be there because who achieves it? The people. So when you pour into the people, your KPIs will be met. And if they're not met, it's an opportunity for a conversation. And again, that's where the beauty happens. That's where there's conversions of learning opportunities. And people have that reactive approach of, it should have been this, it should have been that. There's always room for two things: listening, pausing, which leads to a meaningful conversation.
So many of our listeners are solopreneurs and business owners that maybe have small businesses. I'll use myself as an example. My business has one employee, which is me. So personal growth often starts, obviously with ourselves. But how can a small business or a business of one put people over the profits and apply some of these things? How can I become a better heart-centered leader when I'm really just leading myself and growing my business? Now, someday I may have employees as we continue to grow, but how can I apply these tactics? Tactics is probably not the right word, but how can I apply these principles to myself and my business when it's just me?
There's no just, it's you. And the more you work on yourself, the better solopreneur you're going to be. So I'm a solopreneur, but I have like an admin team. So when I'm chatting to people about potentially becoming a client, I use all the strategies we talked about today. I'm not selling anything. I'm having a conversation. I'm listening. I'm hearing what the needs are, what modalities they're looking to have. It's multiple conversations until we have to get to the sales, or what I like to call the exchange of time and how much money. It's multiple conversations. And a lot of people have said to me, you need a CRM, you need funnels, you need. Well, I'm 35 years at the end of next month, so I think I'm doing okay. You don't have to climb on, it's the technology thing again. You don't have to climb on the latest and greatest. I'm not looking to scale at this point in my life. I'm on what I call legacy work. But I've always grown my business slow and consistent, and my business has continued to grow from referrals. And I work within a lot of companies. So I may start off with one person, and then when I'm finished with them, I'm asked to go work with this person or this team. And I'm never in a rush. We have time to be slow and methodical, but we talked and joked before you hit record about being an expert. I don't want to be known as an expert. I'm a seasoned leader in heart-centered leadership with a love for neuroscience. And I think the combination of every part of my life, every chapter of my life, whether it be resilience or success or learning, has all contributed to where I am present day. But I'm continuing to learn. I love to read. I love teaching my students at college and university. And like you, there is nothing that will ever be better than what we're doing right now, which is having a meaningful conversation.
Absolutely. Which I'm not gonna, we don't have time to go through that, but my life story is filled with all kinds of imperfections, that have happened over the years, things, and sometimes when you're talking to someone and someone says that's terrible, you're like, that's horrible that a tornado hit a building that you had, is one small example. And I always tell them, no, it's great, because it gave me experience that I would have never had otherwise. And now I can apply those experiences. Being a seasoned leader, I can work through those. And I always tell people that I have no regrets about anything that's ever happened to me, because it's what has made me today. And it's what gives me the ability to be able to work and share those stories, which, as a coach, many times I'm sharing stories because that's how you connect with people. I've often said that statistics are great for reports, but they're not going to help you connect to anybody. So it's that telling stories. And you, as well, as being someone that has embraced life's imperfections, what advice would you give a leader who is listening right now thinking, I think this makes sense, but they're struggling with the idea that, well, what if I fail? I'm going to look bad. Or maybe the company I work for isn't going to go along with this. What would be your advice to that person?
I think my exact words would be, good for you for trying. I'd rather you try and fail than perseverate on an idea of, I wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda. And you get back up and you fall forward.
I like it.
And I have fallen forward many times and don't regret any chapter or any attempt of being a better human in this world. Failure is the foundation to succeeding in anything in life or leadership.
Absolutely. I think I read somewhere, it might have been a John Maxwell book, Failing Forward, where it basically said that's one of the things they don't teach us in school is how to properly fail. Winning, they teach you how to win, but don't teach you how to properly fail. So I wasn't intending on this question, and I'm slightly kind of shifting gears a little bit, but with the experiences we talked about at the beginning, I often coach people because I do believe that you need to have a personal mission statement. And one of the exercises that I do through that is having someone go through and kind of write their obituary of how they would like to see that and think about that end of life. And many times when we do that exercise, and I think it depends a lot on a person's age. Somebody that's maybe in their 70s and heading towards closer to that end of life, their perspective is obviously much different. But what would you tell someone experiencing that time with those executives that were at the end of their life and having that? What are some things that you would encourage people, if they're going through an exercise like that, to think differently? Because a lot of times those responses are very much the same, and it's a starting point in the exercises that I do. We dig deeper. But if somebody wanted to do that on their own, what are some paradigm shifts that you would suggest they think about during that process?
I probably frame it a little bit different. What do you want your legacy to be? For me, with those executives, it really grounded me in knowing that I like the path I've created. I like the path that I'm on. And I'm saying that not from a comparative state, but a reflective state. And it's really simple to live and love and lead with heart. And when they're all aligned, that's a life well lived. And the hardest part that people have is being able to lean into that and all the emotions that come with that. because we have so many emotions every day. And if we could just, one of my favorite lines in my book is the best diet to be on is to lose the weight of other people's opinions. And if we could just stay in our own lane and our own growth and not worry about everybody else, that's where I'm at in my life. And that was a reiteration to me that I love being in the JOMO. I'm not a FOMO person. I'm not addicted to the technology. Like, I think this is kind of a full circle question from everything we've chatted about today. I think we have to figure out who we are, what we want, what we need, and where you want to go is a beautiful journey. It's not a destination of task filled with exhaustion and disbelief.
Wonderful. I like it. Excuse me. So where can our audience, one, find your book, and two, where can they connect with you if they're interested and want to reach out and connect directly with you?
So my website has everything, debcrowe.com. E on the end of Crow just means I'm Irish. And my book and everything is on my website. Everything all encompassing of the work I do is there. And that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Now, as we come to the end, we do something at the end of each one of our podcasts. I ask 3 rapid fire questions. We ask every guest these. And the first question really has been derived out of many years of conversations with leaders, with leadership experts, and hearing kind of, statements such as, many years ago, people learned this. When I was in school, we did this. The new generation coming out of school doesn't have this. And I thought, what a great opportunity to ask leadership experts from around the world if we could magically put all of the school administrators across the world in front of us. What would be one piece of advice you would give them of something that they can include or add to their curriculum that would help to turn out better, well-rounded, graduating students ready for life and ready for leadership?
I think they need to create a course on leadership called Managing the Inner Leader, and that young children can learn that validation comes from within and not from an external source.
I like it. Second question, what is your go-to book that over the years you have continually went back to get good insights out of?
Oh, I have so many. I have a whole library here. Oh, I can only pick one?
Yep.
I think I'm going to go with the Emotional Intelligence series that started way back in the late 80s. So there's multiple authors, and I've loved seeing the evolution of that. And I love seeing it now academically being a course that people are thriving. And it's also becoming one of the top 5 skills that employers want in all of their employees, not just in leadership. So I'm going to say Emotional Intelligence, several authors, not because I don't want to miss saying one. That would be my go-to.
Okay. And last question is, in this ever-changing world of technology, and we talked about technology a little bit earlier, what is your most useful and favorite piece of technology today?
From a device or a platform?
Either one.
I love my iPad because I can do so many things on it, and it holds a special memory for me. When I closed my last pediatric brain injury patient file, I decided to buy myself something to embark on the journey and the closing of that chapter because it felt like a loss. So I bought an iPad. I still love holding books, but I enjoy reading on the Kindle Reader. And I just love that I can look at any article that I want and just read and have that be part of my self-care and just enjoying technology, but not being interrupted by other things because I don't have all the programs on there. It's just kind of my digital detox and my deep world of where I want to go and what I want to do.
I like it. Well, Deborah, thank you so much for joining us today. I had a lot of fun in the conversation, and I think it would be great to have you on again in the future. I think we could talk for a couple more hours probably about this subject and other leadership subjects. But thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and nothing will ever beat a great conversation like this.
I agree 100%. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, check out our past episodes. Don't forget to subscribe to us on whatever platform you're on so that you get alerts when the new episodes are released. Until next time, we appreciate all of you.